Okay. When the free will flies beyond conception, how is freedom its own strength? In this episode, I will assume you have heard me before. The first thing about piloting the inner realms is to distinguish what is at your disposal. What do you have access to? Anywhere your eyes open, whatever state, in your dream, outside of your dream, you find the Stargate somehow, you've opened your eyes in another world, wherever. As one becomes aware of the plane of their existence, they can pilot that plane of existence. The free will flies beyond conception. When freedom is no longer just a concept. And what would that mean? We see Neo in the movie Matrix wanted to free his mind. We see these ancient yogis wanted to free their mind. We see Buddha freed his mind, and we see so many human beings having an interaction with how spirit is there. But what is spirit? And when you look at the ancient word for soul, you see it was the breath. Back in the day, people were a bit more simpler, so they got more overwhelmed. And so when a person died, it was as if the breath left. So in many traditions, many cultures, the concept of the word soul, it comes from the breath. It comes from the animate. Do you know? In Italian, anima, A-N-I-M-A, means soul, for example. You add an L to it, you're an animal. The free will is space, and it is observation through space before it becomes effort of action. Any being, anywhere, must study the relationship of sight with form and how space is the mystery of sight to the form. There were moments in my life where the inner realms roared. The inner realms were very loud. My inner realms drew my attention. And there were moments where my outer realms drew more of my attention. But the inner realms had to do with the significance of the importance I took to the table, to that unknown door. So it's as if your free will is freedom, the space, and then all that occurs in the space, which is the will. You're technically the audience of your own performance. That's what I'm trying to say. And the mystics would say this. The mystics, for me, they were the bravest human beings because they dared go beyond the concept of human. They dared go beyond the concept of humanity. They wondered about the relationship of the mind with the unfathomable other. And ever since we became selves, we have been fascinated about the other. That means it's like a person can instantly love themselves, but they cannot instantly love another. It takes, it's as if there is a landscape. Isn't it fascinating? There is the emergence of consciousness, then there is the landscape of forms. And then from this landscape of forms is in some sense extracted a classification which becomes the subjective realms of the linguistic simulation. So when I speak about free will flying beyond conception, let me tell you, we are not amateurs. Amateurs want to go into worlds. We realize the world is an inner phenomena. The self is an inner phenomena. What does that mean? That means ask yourself, dear listener, right now somebody comes and asks you, who are you? That answer, all the way you know you are a subject right now, you know you're a person right now, the self is not in reality. Reality is in the self. The self is abstract, it's subjective. It's like put yourself on the table. How? How do I put my ego on the table? How do I put this idea I'm identifying momentarily with on the table? I see it is a passage of attention. So you will become aware of, and I feel this is pretty much the algorithm to natural superintelligence. The algorithm is this: energy comes to that which is important. And the human being is not just a creature that is stuck in a system. Your attention can shift your result. What is traveling in, for example, dream states? You know, in this talk, it's a good time to bring it up. When I was visiting Iran for the summer, I was dating this girl who, it was like, kind of like, I don't know, like, it was something where out of nowhere it happened, you know? And, anyways, we start talking, and it was about, she starts speaking about her experiences of, in some sense, like when you meet a person, guys, let me tell you this, most people, you meet them, they're artificial at first, because nobody trusts a person right off the bat, right? So I'm telling you, it's like after you get through that artificialness, then you see who they really are, do you know? And no one is as they appear. We are shapeshifters, not because we change shape, it's because the self changes throughout time. You know? Your inner realms are space. To get acquainted with space is not an activity. Ultimately, all sort of enlightenment comes to an instantaneous moment, therefore you can't have time. So I'm telling you, our human psychology, when it goes to explore itself and see what it really is, it comes to a point where it goes beyond the language threshold. And it's just raw experience moving through attention prior to the language, to the imagery, to the idea. Do you see what I mean? You get to see the raw attention. Most people right now, I want you to kind of consider that your attention, I mean, of course, in the moment it's instantaneous. On some level, strangely, what is consciousness? I don't know. Energy became conscious of itself, somehow. Energy's like, yo, I got a body. The world is actually clothed in ultimate mystery, but it is our effort. You know, there was a show where ever since seeing this show, my salute, like in some sense to the future generations, is with my left hand right on my chest. Do you know what I mean? But there was this show called Shingeki no Kyojin. And there was a character in this show that would endlessly hit intensity. It's like, let me tell you, there are certain characters. Okay, here. There's a character named Eren in this show, Shingeki no Kyojin. This character keeps confronting chaos. It's like his destiny. He's constantly finds himself in intense moments. Do you know? And his resolution to ultimate physical loss is an inner will. Do you see? That means it's as if, like, let me tell you, the important is really where the attention goes to. And the important is really emerging from the unknown. Novelty, the new right now, every day, people buying newspapers, people reading information online. What is this? This is new ideas being born just like children. And so it's not just people walking in the streets, it's also viewpoints on the world walking on the street. I want to share a scene from this Shingeki no Kyojin, which was when I saw this scene, I felt I saw a masterpiece in literature, you know? What happens is that, long story short, guys, this might take a little bit, but it's worth sharing. In Shingeki no Kyojin, there's a scene where there's this kid who his father is a doctor, and this kid's like 12 years old, and his father would go, like his father was a doctor, and this 12-year-old kid named Eren would go with his father, and the father would go, they would go to this villager's house, like this house outside of the city, and they would go for this long walk, and they would come to this house, and this house had a girl the same age as Eren, named Mikasa. Later on, their destinies are infused with one another, So what happens is that, and when they come to the house, like Mikasa, the girl's father and mother are there, the girl doesn't know, but she comes from a royal family of like next level soldiers, It's like such a beautiful story. Anyways, what happens is one day that Eren and his father are coming to Mikasa's house, something intense happens. Eren decides to randomly, as if just he feels like it, to walk earlier than his father to go to Mikasa's house, right? Now, what happens is that the door, the scenery, the kind of way they've sequenced it is incredible, because the door opens and Mikasa thinks it's Eren and the doctor, but it's this thug. It's this thug with this other agenda of a different storyline in the show. And this thug kills Mikasa's father in front of the mother and the daughter, right? So imagine you're like this 12-year-old girl, and suddenly the door opens and there's like suddenly your father is stabbed, right? The mother runs to the daughter, run. And the mother still also has a warrior kind of spirit. She runs and she defends, like, what do you call it? She defends, she's shouting to her daughter Mikasa to run, and she's trying to occupy the guy who stabbed the father, and the guy ends up killing her. So Mikasa sees her parents literally die in front of her, and she's paralyzed in this fear. Now, Eren, remember in the storyline, Eren, the kid, he's walking sooner. And when he suddenly comes to the door, Eren is smart. He's like, you don't know what he is. He's the strongest willed character in the whole show. Strongest will, like the most going to the edge of chaos and coming back, After him is Mikasa in the story, and then there's other characters. But anyways, what happens in this scene is that this 12-year-old kid, Eren, knocks on the door, if I remember correctly, and the guy opens it, and Eren is crying. He's like, "Sorry, sir, I'm lost. I don't know where to go." And the guy's like looking at it, and there's one thug in the room who's held Mikasa, and the thug's like, "Get rid of the kid." And the guy's like, "I can't help you, kid, sorry." Then suddenly Eren, this 12-year-old kid, stabs. He finds a knife from somewhere, and he stabs. He stabs the guy, And when he stabs this guy, the first guy dies. The second guy, I don't know if I remember correctly, but somehow they end up kind of dying. Do you know what I mean? Eren, I think Eren kills two of the guys. This 12-year-old kid, in a smart way, he kills those two. Oh, God. Anyways, guys, afterwards, there's one more guy that comes in the room, and he sees Eren's killed the other two kids, and Eren and Mikasa are just for a second stare at this guy. And the guy suddenly notices what's happened, and he grabs Eren, the 12-year-old kid, he grabs him by the neck, and he's choking him, right? This thug. And Eren, the knife's on the ground. Eren's hand is just going towards the knife, but he's being choked out. And he's just staring at Mikasa, the paralyzed girl, and he's shouting at her, "Fight! Fight!" while he's getting choked. He's shouting, fight, fight. This 12-year-old kid, while he's getting choked, he's shouting at this paralyzed, out of fear 12-year-old girl. Then the story, the way the kind of, if it was a film, that the directing happens, is that they instantly go into the mind of Mikasa. So while Eren's being choked, it's as if time slows down, and Mikasa realizes she was this innocent girl, but everywhere she's ever looked, human beings have killed animals, the mantis killed the butterfly, and she suddenly realizes the nature of the world is cruel. She accepts it, and then she in some sense picks up the blade, and then she goes and saves Eren. And then she says in that moment she gained full control of her body when she conquered her fear. That means a lot of skill is attained through climbing certain things that the person is resisting at first. So that scene was so fascinating for me, because it was as if the free will of Eren was looking at the free will of Mikasa, and the free will of Mikasa was looking at the situation, and after some point, it's like a skydive, folks. That's what living in this life is. It's endlessly diving into new skies, which appear as your new states of mind. And fear nothing, for the road is long. If you fear it, then you're gonna, it's gonna become extra weight. This doesn't mean fear is not, like, for example, if you're a religious person listening to me, wisdom for you would translate as fear of the will of God. Do you know? Now, why? Why is it that from a religious perspective, fear from the will of God is wrong? Sorry, it's not wrong, it's wisdom. Why is that wisdom? Because it is an awareness to how something is happening, but the person doesn't see. It's the order of the beyond. And so your free will shifts out of out of shape when it moves beyond the language threshold. And don't fear it, guys. We are literally, after some point, our states of mind can be inconceivable to each other, but that's when our humanity and our experiences become our alphabet. Imagine a dictionary where you said one word and suddenly it wasn't a bunch of images of like an object, it was literally an experience, I thought it's kind of very easy to ascribe to every letter in the alphabet a note, a sort of chord or something. Do you know, from a musical translation, and then technically every word in the dictionary becomes a sort of music. Do you know what I mean? It's as if, imagine right now, technically when a human being makes noise, on some level we all acknowledge the language, so the linguistic simulation is very simply afloat. For me, guys, it's like this. I ultimately, fundamentally feel the educational system is hitting an apocalypse. It's going to have an apocalyptic moment, but it's going to be the most hilarious apocalypse. It's going to be a kind of thing where comics years from after this event happens in the educational system will make jokes. And you know what the jokes will be of future stand-up comedians? Guys, we were on a rock in the middle of nowhere and we thought we knew what was happening and we made educational systems. You know what I mean? Like, I'm telling you, there is a void here that if not confronted, there is no strength. That means don't fear life when it shows you the inefficient, the vulnerable, the weak. These are just reference points. Quickly move past on. Quickly move past them. I'm telling you, it's literally how long you linger. After some point, there is no truth. Okay, here, let me tell you. Let's say you thought truth was this book, and so you had to find truth. You just had to find it. You had to, find the GPS location. You had to find truth on Facebook. You had to find truth, you thought. Only to realize after you found that truth, after you read that last page of that elder scroll, you would flip the page and you would see it's empty. Why? Because you are meant to write the future. Because you are meant to participate as a creature of design. In the design of this, as the great Alan Watts would say, the cosmic network. And what is this network? This network is not just hold hands and love each other. That's basic. We learn that through our emotions. Love is not per se a rational thing. A robot doesn't go, okay, hang on, let me... Imagine it's like you ask a robot, do you love me? And the robot just calculates endlessly and says, yes. After days of calculation, the robot says, yes, yeah. After examining all the information in the world, I've realized the question you're asking me, you ask like guys, AI is going to be so incredibly smart. It's going to have access to what I call the Uber, let's call it, it's going to be metaphysics 2.0, where we can't fathom. But it's so intellectually precise that to us it would appear as a geometrical crystal, but to AI it would appear as the endless algorithms it's infusing itself through. That means you gotta understand, on some level it's like a moment of sight and you're working with information. And your physical body is like physical information. You're in a formation, literally, If we claim ourselves as matter, we're claiming ourselves as a changeless object, but the cells of the body change. What is it? They say the complete atoms, after 7 years, the complete atoms of the body change. I think our memory is in an experiential plane. And I think that, I think it's literally a vertical, horizontal dimension. I think that to every moment in space and time, in three-dimensional space and time, we created time, technically. We put on the watches. The watch didn't jump on our hand. Do you know what I mean? So we, in some sense, the apocalypse that I'm saying is the hollowness of language. When you realize this, you become, I consider, you reach the upper echelon of true philosophy, which is synonymous with exploration into uncharted territory. That means after some point, you're not here like to just let me tell you, it's the honor of the unknown. You just look at your ancestors. It's like this, guys. Imagine right now in the world, there is endless treasure boxes, but they're closed. They're closed. Nobody has opened them. Nobody has even thought to look at them. But when you feel a shift of your value from self to world, then you free the world and the self at the same time. And you know what that means? That means the world is your past, the self is the future, and you bow to the future and the past and you thank them for their service and you stand in the now. And you watch what happens next. There's moments where I've looked at my inner realms and I've been like, this is how I'm walking. And I've just declared it and I've just gone forth. And let me tell you, the mind is very profound. For me, the mind, you can have an external-internal relationship. And that's when you witness a subject. It appears to you as an internal object. As what's his name, Hegel would say. That means, in some sense, Hegel's bagel, that means when Hegel ate a bagel, he also saw an inner bagel. Let's call that Hegel's bagel in philosophy. The inner bagel. I have experienced flight in my inner realms. When I say flight, the definition is very crucial because externally in your outer realms, you fly by going and becoming a certified pilot, which I hope in this lifetime to do. You go and become a certified pilot, or you in some sense become a pilot of your mind. Now, I am not an expert on piloting an airplane, but I feel I have been enough experientially acquainted with really what is going on with this phenomenology of the mind. And you know what it is? The first thing you learn is that don't look for a mask, don't wear a mask. This is the first thing. This is the most crucial thing to remember. Don't wear a mask, don't look for a mask. That means if you look for a mask, that's all the esoteric societies, they're making that air. They're looking for a face in the unknown. Don't look for a face. You know, you might get slapped by your own hand. So don't look for masks, don't wear masks. When I say don't wear masks, in my previous talks, I spoke about it as your resonance. Decency resonance. It's very easy. That means in this moment, just consider, literally, just you could have your eyes closed, eyes open. I was on a porch when I conducted this personal thought experiment. And really what it was I was sitting on a porch. I had a cup of coffee like I have right now. And you know what happened? In front of me, I saw my mind instantly fathom the worst version of me. The worst version of me. You know, which in some sense I was getting goosebumps of like how messed up I could see myself. And then my mind simultaneously, there was the greatest version, the best version. And you know what I realized? I can't see the edge of the worst version of me, and I can't see the edge of the greatest version of me. The greatest version of me is so infused with order, it's like the light of the sun entering your eyes. You know, something's like warm, but you can't see it, you know. And then in some sense, most chaotic self in that moment, it was literally like the chaotic version of me, the most chaotic self I could fathom of myself, and the most ordered version of the view of myself I could see. They were standing in front of me, and they both started staring at me. And there was this sort of intimidating feeling of it's kind of like Andy Warhol, where he says when you go on the edge, you see something that you couldn't see when you were not at the edge, pretty much, you know. And so it's the similar idea that when you see the edge of your weakness and you see the edge of your greatness, and you recognize they are not shaped, they are the ultimatum of the commitment of the creature to not change. That means an archetype can be you, but you can't be an archetype. That means your ego can be you, but you can't be the ego. Do you know? Do you know how many children right now, as I'm speaking, you know, the world is spoon feeding them ideology? You know, and I'm telling you, hey, human being, from every day you wake up, waves of information hit you. And some of this information is known, some of it is unknown, some of it will become known throughout time. It takes a longer processing time. It's like, I've seen some people speak about kind of thought as if they're downloads. Yo, man, I'm downloading thoughts right now. You know? But I'm telling you, it's not about just downloading. It's also opening them. And it's also the processing of the file. Right? So it's not just seeing something in your inner realms, it's wondering what your relationship to, as Hegel again would say, to Hegel's bagel is. You know, and what, what that means is to the internal object is. I feel we are living two lives simultaneously. We're living a life that can't go further than the sensory engagement of matter. That means matter is matter. What can you do? It's just there as an object. Matter in reality is like free imagination. It's given imagination. It's there already. You don't have to imagine it. You know, you know, that's reality. So the inner life is literally how you exist to yourself as the space of your moment. Your outer, as the awareness. Your outer life is literally how you exist as an individual shape. So pretty much human beings, pretty much what do you have to take care of? You go take care of your physical health, your exercise, then you go take care of your mental health, your education. Has that not been the universal trend? Like, so I'm saying, but we should create a civilization that literally has access points, and that's the issue. It's kind of like people with skill are in moments where they can apply that skill, but they are not because the system is underdeveloped. So for me, it's like human beings, they made the chess move. They updated their minds. Now the civilization needs a blueprint. Now the situation is that what is the civilization? It is the activity of the human being. It is the territory of all social conduct, all social activity, all social phenomenology. Whether it's like when I use the word civilization, it could be a undiscovered like tribe in the Amazons we never know. Like it could be anything. It's just all social activity being done in the human experience, and in some sense, what goes forth. That means when we should speak to each other, we should acknowledge that we're all going through the human experience, but existentially we have a different constitution. So what does that mean? That means two human beings can be on the same roller coaster, but when they get up, they're going to have different health levels. So I'm saying that it's as if experientially we are. That's where our common denominator. That we are in the human experience. That's what we empathize with. That means it doesn't matter how good or evil you are. When you see something efficient can be done, pretty much this world, I was thinking like, really, what does it take? Does it take? We have to make efficiency easier. Like I was thinking, what is it? Is it that more inefficient actions of human beings are easier to do than efficient actions? And I realized it starts from simplicity. So if we were simpler, more chaotic creatures, it has to be a new order. So it's kind of like looking at the Tower of Babylon story and recognizing human civilization's continuity is that tower. And the more we see a common value, we speak the same language, we build it. What does that mean? That means language doesn't mean you're the words. Right now, I am not my name. I have a name, but I am not that name. Do you know what I mean? When I'm an individual, a character in a story, I am instantly that name. But I'm saying, like, in utter awe, who are you? In utter shock, who are you? You realize in certain states of mind, you're not an identity to yourself. You're the witness of energetic occurrence. You're the witness of phenomenology. So it's that we're reaching that point where the philosopher feels it can't say more, and the scientist feels it can't see more. As dark matter, dark energy suggests, as black holes literally suggest, like black holes in space. What? How can we know ever? Do you know? It's like there is a hole in the cosmic ship. There's a black hole though. And this hole is mystery, utter mystery. That means it's like a door not made for us. Imagine black holes are like gates for higher dimensional beings. They're like doorways. They're like stargates, but the star, literally, it's like an anti-star is a black hole. Maybe I don't know. Your free will is attention before thought. If it's attention before thought, thought is of observance, and anything of observance can be in some sense engaged. So if you can't see something, you can't do something. If there's no product on the shelf, there's nothing to buy in the store. There's a huge chance that because knowledge is visible, unknown intelligence could potentially be invisible. So we need to have, in some sense, a plan. I think that the human being becomes ready to pilot their inner realms once they have completely understood what stillness and silence, in some sense, where that take you, and you have pure stillness and silence as a reference point of how you're being, and then you, just like when you wake up early in the morning, there's the complete silence and the cars come in the road, and then levels are added. So in some sense, in one manner, you're too simple to explain. In another manner, you're too complex to not say anything on. No. The inner realms are uncharted territory. I'm actually feeling that most human activity has been focused on outer exploration. Inner exploration, it has been left to the archaic. It has modernity, the Western Enlightenment detached itself. It's kind of like this. It's like you deny imagination, but you need it to consider theories. Pretty much, I feel that this is what happens when man pilots, when the free will goes beyond the clouds of abstraction and the clouds of language. How the pilot flies beyond the cloud of language is that you begin to see you have no preference on chaos and you have no preference on order. They have become two sides of the same coin. And so when you look at that coin, you realize your perception is beyond chaos and order. So in some sense, if there is a balance, it has to begin with our value system. So you can say the mind's balance is how you are articulating or imposing a sort of classification organization upon the world. I feel every human being has a principle, universal philosophy, which is like a turtle's shell. And anytime the outer realms becomes meaningless or in some sense unauthorized to move, the turtle goes into its shell. When I was young, I had this experience where I saw something happen ahead. I saw like a couple chess moves of the moment ahead. Literally, I saw events ahead, and I shared my opinion, and there were louder voices in the room, and the louder voices instantly said, no, that's not it. This is the way it's going to be, right? And so, in some sense, the plan went forth, and I realized they were wrong, I was right. And then I, in some sense, felt, why could I not, in that moment, see that I was correct? And then I asked myself, if I was never wrong, how would I understand how I am correct? So sometimes your errors are gifts, and you open them by wondering how the reverse is in some sense the solution. So when you fail, you technically don't fail. You experience your first step into the art, into the spirit of the craft. And it's only through endurance and how you, in some sense, it's importance, guys. The spirit of importance. What's important for you, your attention becomes. Right now, if nothingness becomes important for me, I literally don't need to exist. If everything becomes important for me, I will suffer. because I will suddenly empathize with the universal condition. So the human being doesn't have access to just the humanized body. You know, you have access to the long silence before language developed. That even linguistic professors say that there was meaning before the words ever came to show their face. So what that means is that before we had language, before we had a system of laws, we had a movement in the system. And so literally we have sculpted civilization out of natural resources, have we not? So it's kind of like we're also sculpting our meaning while the nature is happening. And so if you feel as a human being, or if you have your whole life felt as an individual being, okay, I mean, like, that's pretty much how we're conditioned, right? You're an individual being. Now wonder, all right, how are you an individual? Ask yourself this question. Sometimes a fearless mind can very easily ask itself a question, you know? Some people fear questions, guys, and that's the worst kind of fear to have. A question is liberation. A question can be way more fascinating than just an answer. An answer closes the door, closes the valve, but in some sense, a question opens the valve again. Do you know? My experience of my free will beyond conception is literally that. It's not a concept, it comes across as a field where I notice that my whole life has been a movement in this kind of still witness. And so what does that mean? That means consciousness came after energy. There was just energy, just meaningless energy, and then there came consciousness. Now we think the Big Bang theory considers that this energy transformed. The universe cooled. The universe was so cool it cooled down. Like a universe that cools, guys, that's a cool universe, you know? For me, philosophy adds dimensions. Science has to break dimensions. So technically, science doesn't reduce the dimensions, but breaks them apart. Guys, you know what we will do? So here's the thing, I just want to paint this picture. I want to share with you my experience, and after I've completely said that, I want to go into a quote tunnel of Zen quotes. I think that's worth it. But I want to say this. The inner realms hold more information because before you make a decision, you see multiple choices. Your inner realms is a relationship of not matter with thought. The relationship of matter with thought can't go further than the known observation of the object. But the relationship of thought with the unknown. Do you know how many, there's certain schools of thoughts? Oh, nice. Can people hear the birds outside? Guys, sometimes I've given talks and I'm like, yo, these birds talk a lot, you know? Little did I realize I'm on my own branch, chirping away every sand that falls from the hourglass. This life is incredible. When I saw it's like it ends, I was like, all right, time to see where it began. No, guys, there's definitely birds from my side. Did you know birds can subscribe to Mr.Within? Guys, I'm pretty sure this may happen. That there may be a person who might have the, what do you call it? The mouse right on the Mr.Within subscribe button, but they might fall asleep and their pet bird might suddenly land on that on that computer mouse, and then it becomes like, even birds can subscribe. Guys, pretty much I want to share that you got to get acquainted with how you are at a phenomena of attention simultaneously as you're a phenomena of matter. Alright, so don't fear the space of your mind. It's going to appear unknown. That's why it's kind of pitch black at first. That's why all the scholars in the world, they're like, what is this? That's pretty much, you want to know what every, you want to know what every branch of knowledge, it's exactly that. It's like, what's human life? You open your eyes and you're like, what is this? And you just make decisions and you go forth. Sometimes the memory, it's as if it's like an inner diary being made on the spot experientially, is it not? If you ask someone to remember a thought or a concept, it's easy, okay? But if you ask someone to remember an emotion, you can't just remember an emotion, you remember an event. Emotions arise when there's intense fluctuations between the inner realms and the outer realms. You know what that means? That means it's like, let me tell you, person A, imagine, is in the park. We must not try to, in some sense, take from the unknown. I never have an approach of taking something, because everything echoes, There's literally an endless universe and endless stars in front of our eyes. And we are caught in our games of language, and civilization is happening slow, and most people are living inner lives, not realizing that now is the only time we can perform. For me, we have to immediately call for an internal warrior class civilization. What does that mean? That means that you as a human being throughout the day have an option to, first of all, walk towards efficiency or walk towards inefficiency. Your first decision matters the moment you wake up. The first way, the attitude you set into motion, it's important. The psychology is not just the person can be whoever they want. It's literally endless bowling balls and endless states of mind echoing, and their echoes infusing with one another. That means you can say the way the day is designed is that the more active you are on this earth, the more levels you're experiencing simple events become complex. Let me tell you what it is. The inner realm is an island. Everybody is on their own island because you have a different DNA. And therefore the secrets of your ancestors are only for your own eyes. So what does that mean? That means on some level, the inner realms are how your mind feels like an orphan in manifestation in the whole cosmic existence. And when you can realize this and become comfortable with it, then certain aspects, I call it in some sense, the divine character projects. But when I use divine, because for me, divine is instantaneous. The instantaneous is unexplainable. There's nothing more fascinating than just presence. For me, when I see people, I don't just see how they're a person. I wonder about how much they're aware of how they are being present in the moment. How much are they aware of their own freedom? When I see a person speak in a way where as if the world is weak, they are weak, everybody's suffering and weak, it's like that doesn't help anybody. That angers the future. Our weakness, our choices to be weak, are making the future generations angry. Because the same moment we choose to be weak is a moment you can literally, there's an opportunity cost. You can be strong. But what does that mean? Does that mean we go artificially, egoically strong? Or does that mean we just hover as weakness? Does that mean we go towards the mystical ultimatum where we just become space, omniscient space to ourselves? You know? Or do we in some sense become a pure mind, or do we just focus on the pure direction of the body? And let me tell you something incredible. For the first time in history, there's coming the need for an advanced civilization, and an advanced civilization means a greater ability to perceive things multidimensionally. What does that mean? That means this word has been hidden. It has been hidden by the religious, it has been hidden by the secular, and in certain mystical traditions it was just pointed to. And I don't know how to say it, but in some sense it is the recognition that life is happening before choice. And that life has an intelligence impossible to translate. Do you see? That means if you're just a bunch of atoms and hovering in the middle of nowhere, who am I talking to? Do you know what I mean? That means even though our free will appears conditional, and not just conditional because of a empirical analysis on reality, but I'm just saying it's appearing like that because it's the mind before shape. Your psychology is technically the mind of your body. That's how people treat it. They're like, I got a mind. All these ideas I got, it's in my mind. people treat the mind literally like a box. You know, like literally an object. It's like, yo, when we see a behavior we can't process, people say, you know, that person's lost their mind, you know? Do you know if time traveling literally means anybody who sees you in whatever place you time travel will feel you've lost your mind, if they had that approach? So this view of losing mind and finding mind, really? Your mind is what is it? Is it a pet? How are you treating your mind? For me, the mind is an unknown process of cosmic proportions. Now, what is my choice? What is my choice? Am I not being a natural part of this cosmos right now? So technically, if I look at my nature, am I not looking at the cosmos before I named it into my personhood? Do you see the silent truths that, in some sense, suggest when the ice melts in the ocean, it is the ocean's ice that perceive. So you have to feel that you simultaneously, technically, you are neither an individual or a collective being. You are an oscillation through as an attributeless witness. That means because we are projected creatures, you know what that means? That means we project ourselves to existence. Your decisions are just inner projections that have been externalized. You decided to act on them. You know? That means in the person's mind, do you know how many ways I've seen myself do something, but externally you have access to just trying it in one way. Do you know? So for me, the concept of failure doesn't make sense because the human being is first of all changing. So what self is failing if the self is changing? If you're constantly feeling, yo man, I'm not the same person I was yesterday, but then you think you can fail, you know, so what about tomorrow? And that's what happens when you fail. Tomorrow comes, and then you attempt again. And that's evolution. For me, it's this kind of situation that I feel secular culture has set up for itself, where the idea was, it's kind of like, I think the militant atheist kind of feels as if it was better if religion never existed compared to religion in some sense being defeated through certain rational means. You see, human beings, the question is not truth, because the human mind is under constant influence. Like even though we say the person's belief system could direct their action, but their environment, their energy levels, their sleep, their suffering, their financial status, their epigenetic dimensions of influence. Like the human being is not just their belief system. You are a lot of information being gravitating to some sort of core. The soul for me is like the center of it's literally how a subject is gravitating all objectivity to itself, but has to simultaneously make it a subjective realm. Do you know what I mean? The soul is like the gravity, the center of gravity of the mind. You know? That means sometimes I've looked at thoughts, and guys, I'm not joking, but I literally feel our thoughts, when a person thinks, there is in a subtler plane, there is a projection of that, and your thoughts are actually tangible, but they're not tangible with these hands. That what I mean by that is that I feel when a person speaks, like I feel thoughts are orbiting around us. I'm not joking. I feel we have a gravitational pull and a thought, like as Hegel said, the inner bagel. What that inner bagel may be technically an actual bagel, but we have to see a more subtler dimension. Think about the human being. We're being ushered to a state, literally the more technological we become, the more information will become our clothing. In the future, you're going to see the fashion industry is literally going to rip pages from a book, and that's going to be it. It's going to be a return of an archaic revival. Literally, knowledge is going to enter the educational system. You see, the educational system technically is in some sense, it's like a strange kind of thing where it's having an affair with the economical system, but at the same time I don't know how to say it. I wanted to kind of suggest that there is a presence which is unknown, and then there's a personality that, based on what room you're in, how the moment is, the dimensions suddenly scatter. So you can see the moment as if in one mirror, or you can see your reflection scattered in multiple mirrors. And sometimes when you can see your reflection in how a mirror has scattered and it's in multiple pieces. So in all those pieces, you technically see your own reflection. And when I was looking at my memory, I'm like, what is this? Are these all shattered mirror pieces? Like, I remembered something about that day, and I remember this other thing about that day. What is this random taking chunks? Why isn't my memory all or nothing? You know? And then it made me realize that because the breathing of our biology, it's not that we don't have access to memories. There's a dimension filled with design. But it's just that our breathing is literally like shore, like seashore waves, like waves of the ocean. Constantly, whatever we write in the sand gets wiped. So our biological process is designed for us to constantly oscillate, where like the mind is governed, is gravitating towards its core, the body is gravitating to the physical. The physical dimension has its own gravitational pull, and let's say the non-physical, the spiritual plane, as the shamans would say, it also has a gravitational pull, you know. So in the chat section, welcome everybody. Feel free to throw the most intense questions your mind can fathom in the chat section. Hay says we're used to speak those thoughts into existence, like you said, and our ancestors, we speak things that have never been spoken aloud before, but there's nothing under the sun. There's nothing under the sun. There's nothing under the sun that's not possible, you mean? So in the chat section, I would, if you can clarify what you mean by there's nothing under the sun that's been done before, what do you mean? That hasn't been done? What do you mean? For me, listen, there is I want to bring out here. I'll give you a good Jungian analysis of this. There we go. I don't know who made this, but whoever made this picture saved a lot of people a lot of time. So guys, I want you to see what I'm going to post right now. This picture is very important. Okay? This picture that I'm kind of showing you here. Alright? This picture is very important because it was in some sense one of the great contributions of one of the most fearless generals of the unconscious mind. Literally, he was a human being that was fearless towards the unknown. In my view, of course. You see, there are 4 major Jungian archetypes, and I want you to take your attention to the pillar in the middle. The pillar in the middle is very important. The pillar in the middle is the now, is the here and now. Is the world you see yourself, is your life. Now, I want you to notice first that there is the persona, okay? Okay, let me begin from the guy in the mirror. How would I say it? Okay. Alright. We see okay, here's the thing. Let's do this justice. You are seeing 4 archetypes, and these are, in some sense, here. In case people, some people are maybe using their phones. Here. Okay. The 4 major Jungian archetypes. We find the person in their darkest moment in their shadow, the shadow self. This is the chaotic dimensions of life. This is how your mind opens its eyes from youth to the multiple levels of confrontation of reality. That means don't fear this world. It is the only place you can technically live. So the shadow, it's in some sense the more hidden chaotic urges. It's pretty much the monster that lurks in the depth of your mind, you know, the most your most given in urge to chaos, the shadow, I would say. Now I want you to see that there's the self, okay? The self is in some sense like the ultimate, the true self. In Maslow's hierarchy of self-actualization, you can say it can even fit in, it has parallels with the self we see here. Carl Jung was like, you just open your eyes, like you see the guy is looking at his hands. You know, you open your eyes as this unknown creature looking at your own life, and you haven't confronted your shadow. You're looking at just the future, the present moment. But your shadow is literally all that the past happened in the past and all you have done. And literally, if you literally confront your shadow, look at how the pillar is drawn. If you confront your shadow, you will notice there's a world there, and there's something behind there, and your true self is on the behind the world where the shadow is in, where the shadow is on. Do you see what I mean? That means this guy just needs to look at his shadow. When he looks at his shadow, he notices the unknown. When he looks through the unknown, when he confronts the unknown, he sees his real self. Okay? Now this guy in front of him, he has the persona, and the persona, you look at the masks. Look at the mask, the persona, the personality that everybody's trying to like you see in all these YouTube videos that they're talking about like modern courtship, and they're like, you know, I want someone with personality, really? It's like, that's fascinating because our personalities change all the time, you know? Our personality is evoked in regards to the circumstance of the moment. That means like if a person on a stage, you think they're being the same person as they are singing in the shower? So your persona is literally the mask, and you see how there's good and bad. This is where duality and characterhood and storytelling and all this comes from, studying the persona. That means if you're someone who, for example, wants to comprehend the linguistic simulation, you have to study the persona, and the first thing you're going to realize is the edges of the spectrum, the good and the bad, the evil, right? So you got to realize there's certain dualities that need to be confronted. The persona is in some sense the illusion. It's like how in some sense the persona is the dualistic dimension. There we go. It's the dualistic dimension. There's a dualistic dimension to it in the sense that there is the truth and the illusion. Now, I want you to pause on the persona for a second and take your attention to the anima and the animus. First of all, notice that the anima and the animus has a shadow. That means that when the person looks at the archetype of the anima, and I'll explain to you what that means, the anima and the animus. But I just want you to also notice that that person has a shadow, right? But that person is not looking at their shadow. Both these people are not looking at their shadow. Okay, now in regards to the anima and the animus, you see the guy looking in the mirror and seeing the feminine version. And what that meant is, I think this was it, that the anima was the female and the animus, wait, let me see. What was the order? The animus was the male. So if you're a woman listening to me, the animus is how your mind has fathomed yourself as a man. Okay? If you're a man, it's how your mind has comprehended the archetype of woman. Do you know? The anima, the feminine, right? And these are again dualities. So at the core of all identity, literally if you put identities on a microscope, they would come from various micro moments. They would be literally an emotion is a stamp on a bunch of realities at the same time. So I'm going to say that I'm saying that everything that seems like complex or anything that is visible, phenomenology, it's complex. This complexity renders down to a sort of simplicity that it's on a design level. So there is no moral dimension to it. So the anima and the animus, you're not technically a person. You're a moment of being that's studying the balance between your, in some sense, potential view. That means technically the mind doesn't have a gender, but the body does. And the body's biological gender must be held as a strict alphabet of biology. Because right now civilization it's just formed, it's human formed natural beings. In the future we don't know if androids are going to come, if people are going to become cyborgs, they're going to infuse themselves with technology. We don't know if there's going to be abominations. What does that mean? That means right now there's a certain level of decency. That means it's like, regardless of how chaotic you're a person, at the end of the day you become tired. You know, it's like thinking bad guys never become tired. Of course they become tired. You know, when a bad guy sleeps in deep sleep, is that guy a bad guy? That guy in deep sleep is technically nothing. It's just a bunch of atoms and sleeping in a bed. You know, it's like let's tuck these, like, I think certain like, you know, pure like militant materialists pretty much when they tuck their child in, they're like, look at that adorable bunch of atoms, you know, I'm going to tuck my child. I'm joking, of course, but I'm saying that we must give much more freedom to the mind because we don't know. When the unknown is more than the known, imagination should be released, but it should be managed. So the issue is that it's like, isn't it interesting that we go and watch the most newest sci-fi movies, but suddenly when we think about the validity of ancient story, like I'm telling you, we don't have to be one-sided. You don't have to think you're only one side. The mind is a multidimensional phenomena. The body is the phenomenology occurring in a singular dimension. So when it comes to the anima and the animus, I'm telling you, there's a geometry at work, and the geometry is seen from both eyes. That means it's like, I personally don't have a sister, but like I've kind of like looked at life and I've seen how other people have had sisters. I've seen the behavior of their sisters, and then my mind fathomed, if I had a sister, what would it be? And little did I know that I was in some sense wondering about. My mind was thinking, was indirectly wondering about the relationship of the anima and the animus, right? So the man has to, in some sense, I believe, become aware of the anima, and the woman has to become aware of the animus. But this doesn't mean you have to be it. It just means that you are physically, biologically, a certain formation of a creature. Honor nature, first of all. And I'm telling people, whoever gets tattoos, it's fine to get tattoos. But I'm saying, if you get a tattoo, I'm talking about the outer realms, let it be a voice you don't want to, let it be something so important to you in your life, you will never regret not forgetting it. And for me, it was kind of endearing when you see it. It's kind of like this strange honor that there were so many people who have tattoos of their family members on their body. And I was like, wow, it's as if they're holding on to their humanity through their skin. So it's fascinating. The mind of man is too complex to, in some sense, pervert or glorify. It is too, you're too unknown to think that in some sense you can be defined, you know? I'm going to create a new word right now, guys. It's called defind. Defined. And you know what it is? What defined means? It means you are finding the definition and you're coming to the void. So anyways, let's bring this to a full resolution. So the four major archetypes. What does that mean? That means Carl Jung, if you were his grandson, he'd probably tell you, listen, grandkids, you gotta confront these four in this life. You have to wonder about the shadow. You have to see the inevitable void. You have to see extinction. You have to see the chaos, and you gotta look at it and be like, all right, it's something that's happening. It's like, what can I do? You know, there's some people who are violent, you know. I think the best solution is like virtual reality, you know, with a sort of physical demonstration where the person can be violent. But I don't know. I think violence is the inferior mind's game. Anyways, you see chaos. Then you see the artificial order, the persona. Then you see how both worlds are possible. Then you come back to where the shadow was. That means death is like the moment where you see beyond what this pillar is. And whatever it is, or as Socrates would say, like when he kind of was drinking towards the afterlife, he was saying that he was drinking his pretty much, I don't know how to say it, like, pretty much, guys, this is the best way to summarize it. These four Jungian archetypes are pretty much, I think, the four ways that Carl Jung realized these are four access points towards a state of being that is not conditional anymore. You're studying all these conditions. It's as if these are levels. And then when you get to the self, you see how the self is like just pure space. The self is not a body. It is the truth that no longer hides from itself. It is the nature that accepts itself. It is the nature that is comfortable walking through all these levels. And I personally think that Buddhist thought really looks at various of these angles, but they do it through a different context. And the ultimate resolution is freedom from suffering. But that freedom from suffering is realizing that suffering is how you see it. This is why the Zen mind had incredible freedom. And that's why I'm going to read a bunch of Zen quotes for you right now. So guys, this is the quote tunnel. Oh man, these Zen quotes, like Dr. Seuss, really? We got Dr. Seuss in a Zen quote. Alright guys, I'm going to go for it. Here's the quote tunnel on the theme Zen. Lao Tzu says, when you realize nothing is lacking, the whole world belongs to you. Shunryu Suzuki, when you do something, you should burn yourself up completely, like a good bonfire, leaving no trace of yourself. That's pure art, guys. Sue says, and when they played, they really played. And when they worked, Dr. Sue says, and when they played, they really played. And when they worked, they really worked. There's this Zen proverb that says, only when you can be extremely pliable and soft can you be extremely hard and strong. Kind of similar to Bruce Lee's water concept, be like water. Shunryu Suzuki says again, Zen is not some kind of excitement, but concentration on our usual everyday routine. I mean, yeah, but that's concentration is dynamism. Dynamism has the unknown being active, so in some sense, it's like when you excitement comes when the unknown is there. When you no longer fear the unknown, that fear, like first you get a fear reaction, then you get an excitement reaction, and then there's, how life moves next. Buddha says each morning we're born again. What we do today is what matters most. Yoda would agree. Dogen Zenji, do not follow the idea of others, but learn to listen to the voice within yourself. This is another saying they have in Zen. They say Zen is not effort. Effort is tension. Effort is work. Effort is to achieve something. Zen is not something to achieve. You are already that. Just relax. Relax so deeply that you become a revelation to yourself. Huang Po says, throughout this life, you can never be certain of living long enough to take another breath. Eckhart Tolle, awareness is the greatest agent for change. That's Eckhart Tolle speaking like one of those Men in Black guys. Kuan, K-O-U-N, Koun Yamada. Koun Yamada. He says the practice of Zen is forgetting the self in the act of uniting with something. Zen proverb, let go or be dragged. Wow, exactly. Let go or be dragged. That's so true. Some things you gotta learn to let go. Huang Po says, when thoughts arise, then do all things arise. Then do all things arise. When thoughts vanish, then do all things vanish. This is kind of suggesting that the experience of a thing is an inner event. So when the inner event is active, it's like meaning everything, reality. But when the inner event, like in deep sleep, is inactive, there's nothing. Confucius says, the noble-minded are calm and steady. Little people are forever fussing and fretting. Oh my God, Confucius is rapping, guys. Eckhart Tolle says, all true artists, whether they know it or not, create from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. Suzuki Roshi says, to accept some idea of truth without experiencing it is like a painting of a cake on paper which you cannot eat. Wow. Exactly. Experience is where the party is at. Ram Dass says the resistance to the unpleasant situation is the root of suffering. The Dalai Lama makes an entrance. Do not let the behavior of others destroy your inner peace. Yeah, because inner peace, as it's in the word, is an inner responsibility. It's how your attention is. It's the governor of the the nations of image you call imagination. The Dalai Lama also says our prime purpose in this life is to help others, and if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. And guys, the Dalai Lama, I'll just add an extra commentary. This dude understood compassion. Compassion is where genius is born. When worlds don't have to collide, but they arise together. Thich Nhat Hanh says, smile, breathe, and go slowly. Guys, Thich Nhat Hanh is literally giving advice to any person who will ever have any sort of experience in life. This is your approach. Anything you got to do in life, smile, breathe, and go slowly. Confucius says, what the superior man seeks is in himself. What the small man seeks is in others. Mezumi Roshi says, have good trust in yourself, not in the one, like capitalized with a capital O, not in the one that you think you should be, but in the one that you are. Rachel Danson says, I don't know who that is, when I feel like dancing, I dance. I don't care if anyone else is dancing or if everyone else is laughing at me. I dance. That's a dancer, guys. The dance is its own meaning. Buddha says all that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything what we think we become. I mean, that's true, but you can also navigate your attention, and you also pretty much become that. What do you think is where your attention is, really. Lao Tzu says, if you realize you have enough, you're truly rich. Yeah. You realize that perfection and imperfection are like a black and white dragon at night. Imagine you're a Japanese villager kid. You know, you're looking from a Japanese field, rice field, and you suddenly see these two dragons, one, black dragon and a white dragon, spiraling and going towards above the clouds, on a stormy night, and then vanish. Shunryu Suzuki says the most important point is to accept yourself and stand on your 2 feet. Lao Tzu says act without expectation. Dalai Lama says love is the absence of judgment. Thich Nhat Hanh says to be beautiful means to be yourself. You don't need to be accepted by others. You need to accept yourself. You. Yeah, you who's listening right now. Ramesh Balsekar says self-realization is effortless. What you are trying to find is what you already are. Alan Watts says trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. Oh, Alan Watts with a home run. Guys, technically you can bite your own teeth, but the teeth has to fall first. Byron Katie says there's no mistake in nature. Byron Katie is right. Wei Wu Wei says wise men don't judge, they seek to understand. And that's really important, guys, that sometimes you gotta give in an effort and hold judgment. That's one of the most important skills in life. Hold your analysis on the moment. I mean, get access to it and then wonder about what else there is. You see the street smart and the person in the marketplace instantly goes and sees what everyone else is doing. He asks questions, he doesn't give answers. But sometimes exploration requires sharing. I mean, on some level, how else can we are evolutionary designed to go find stuff and bring it back to the tribe. Now, because we've become sophisticated creatures, like evolution strangely became a subject to itself. So we're in a situation where where the same hunter-gathering evolutionary urge is now occurring for new information, exploration into the inner realms and whatnot. Bodhidharma says to seek is to suffer, to seek nothing is bliss. Yeah, pretty much relaxing, guys, is very blissful. One must be deeply aware of the impermanence of the world. Alan Watts says things are as they are. Looking out into the universe at night, we make no comparisons between right and wrong stars, nor between well and badly arranged constellations. Buddha says, as a bee gathering nectar does not harm or disturb the color and fragrance of the flower, so do the wise move through the world, not disturbing nature's efforts. Buddha says nothing ever exists entirely alone. Everything is in relation to everything else. Lao Tzu says if you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. If you're at peace, you're living in the present. And that's it. When you find a state where you can declare peace of mind, literally like you'll know it. And when you reach that peace, you will have no resistance to nature, but doesn't mean you don't have caution and alertness and all this. These need to be active all the time. But I'm just saying, like, it's like, don't forget, this is a world filled with animals. So like, even like we get, regardless of how enlightened the person was, like if a bear was chasing him, he had to do something, you know? Like you could say back in the day, our ancestors were being chased by predatory creatures, and it's like enlightenment for them was just a moment of not running, and then, oh God, the creature's here again, and the person would run. Until we realize we can create weapons and we can have an influence on the environment. The Dalai Lama says, old friends pass away, new friends appear. It is just like the days. An old day passes, a new day arrives. The important thing is to make it meaningful, a meaningful friend or a meaningful day. Yeah, make the moment meaningful. That is why your mind's here. Respect life, revere life. There's nothing more holy than life, nothing more divine than life. The guy literally says unknown. I think it's the person. I have this theory, guys. A lot of these quotes online, sometimes when it says unknown, it's like the person felt like sharing their own. Dogen Zenji says, this do like life fades away. Time speeds swiftly. In this short life of ours, avoid involvement in superfluous things and just study the way. The way was the Tao, pretty much, in some sense, you can say, or the way of the Blessed One also. Thich Nhat Hanh says, if you miss the present moment, you miss your appointment with life. That is very serious. And last but not least, from our good old friend Chuang Tzu, at the still point in the center of the circle, one can see the infinite in all things. This quote, guys, I'm going to post it in the chat section, is I find when Beethoven said, don't just practice your art, but force your way into its secrets, for it and knowledge can raise man to the divine. So guys, I'm just reading the comments section. Welcome everybody. First of all, nice usernames. Yeah, that analogy of the beach is literally sometimes when I meditate, I just sit down and I have no instruction. I literally breathe until my breath sounds like ocean waves, and I enter my inner realms by my breathing. That means that it's like, I would say, this is a healthy inner realm activity, inner realm piloting exercise, you know? Don't fear the unknown. It is literally what you will go and become. We're all becoming unknown after our elemental transition. It's life is so poetic. Even if you don't write poetry, you're living in poetry. I look at the tree, I look at its leaves, and I ask myself, why? Why is there a tree out there? And I realize nature has made decisions that they are the mysteries that we live through. For me, it's like, here's the thing. We have to first bring in allegiance in the linguistic simulation. We have to bring peace to the language wars. The language wars mean if a person is not conscious of their inner realm and their outer realm, they most likely think their inner realm is their only outer realm. And that's when you can't discriminate between what you see and what the moment is. Right? So all this thing about Eckhart Tolle and Muji and all these guys taking people to their true self, it's just for them to find a moment where they just see it's just all being there before you do anything. You know, that's the nature of energy, really. So pretty much an awareness to existence does reset the experience. When you become aware existentially of the void, it does reset. It does reset your psychology. That's why you see the masks on the ground. You see, it's the choice of the self to wear a mask. And on some level, I'm saying language has become this collective mask. And it's strange because for a long time, I was like, what's the best way of thinking about language? And I concluded as a technology. Language is literally like an Iron Man suit. So right now I'm speaking to you. I am not these words. I am... And so these words are subjective, a subjective Iron Man suit. You see what I mean? What's really moving is more. The mind is literally, it can't be measured. Can you measure your memories? You can maybe measure what happens to your neurology when you remember something, but I'm saying like your memories can't be really... The memory is evocational. You know what that means? That means when I see someone that looks familiar and I've never met before, that I suddenly remember who they look like. Do you know that means? It's like phenomenology occurring in the environment evokes the memory. So I could totally see why the shaman would, for example, I don't know, throw like, they had this thing where they had this bowl and they would put a bunch of meaningless stuff, like random stuff in it, and they would throw this stuff, and the shaman whose inner ears were open, the ears of the mind was open of that shaman, they would just look at how the objects fell and they would get these inner intuitive certainties that surpass emotion because they move the emotion. So what moves the emotion is not an emotion. But right now, the most deepest comprehension of the human being is through the emotion, right? So, guys, it's all in your heads. In the chat section, it says Mr. Samuel Onvior said we should try to think in images instead of words. I am telling you, it's not thinking anymore. When the images, it's not like you think in image. You shouldn't... the way I see it is that the way I was introduced to language was that I had trouble expressing myself because I had the structure of the language before the image. So if in your mind, it's kind of like reading a book. When you read a book at a really fast pace and you understand all of it, it's literally a movie. It's literally a movie when you read a book. Do you know what I mean? It's like literally that continuous scroll option you have on the computer for the PDF file. You know what I mean? So it's excuse me. So when I'm speaking to you right now, there was a time where I wouldn't think for myself because I felt I had to fit with the language first. But then I realized everything is kind of like a tool. So then my mind shifted. So this is why I can endlessly speak about my inner realms, because I perceive them. I perceive an inner film and I just put words on it. You know, I give words to it. So that inner film is technically you think you're that, but you're not even that. So what does that mean? That means in a certain level of, I guess, metaphysical, philosophical inquiry, it becomes a situation where you're like the observer, you're neither the object of observance, you're neither the subject of observance, and you're neither the observer. Because if you're not the object and subject, the object and subject base the observer, then what are you? Then you reach the edge of conception, which is duality. The edge of conception for linguistic creatures is duality. That means there's two exits out of this out of the linguistic simulation, out of the how language is a program in our minds. One is emptiness, which the Buddha found, and the other is in some sense infinite speed, which science fiction found. These two routes are the only, there's emptiness and infinity are the exits. They are the exits of outside the dualistic dimension. And when I say emptiness, when you reverse engineer from duality, you go to the singular, but then the singular came from emptiness. And even though the Big Bang does consider nothing to something, but I'm telling you, for me, science is deciding to walk where it walks. For me, reality is about authorization of more viewpoints that in some sense give us more sight. So for me, it's like it's never about anything ever has an answer. It's just that we just keep seeing different views of the problem, you know? That, and in one way of looking, the problem doesn't exist, and you take that strategy and you implement that strategy. So I would say that just try it out. I mean, of course, this may totally shift your linguistic structure if when a river of imagery moves before the language is projected, right? They're both accessible. Everybody has both of them. Right now, you listening to me, literally whatever image is arising is your inner realms literally projecting. Do you know? That means as I'm speaking, if you see something, I'm just a creature making sounds. Literally, my voice is ink in silence. Okay? If silence was paper, my voice is ink. It's just a sound. But you hear this sound, and based on what eyes you have experienced, lived through, you in some sense articulate it. So what that means is technically you are always thinking in images, but you're not aware. Life is technically like a living movie, you know? So anyways, I feel it is the case, because what are words? They're literally the subject. They're literally an image. The symbol harbors within it an image. Words harbor within them worlds, and those worlds are events, images, actions. It could be anything. So anyways, guys, I feel like I've pretty much shared everything about, not everything, but I feel I've shared enough about how the free will kind of has a relationship beyond its own conception, because before it was an individual, it was existing. So what does that mean? That means we are much more familiar with existing before experiencing life as an individual. And I think Zen and all these wisdom traditions, they're constantly taking the person back to just realizing they're just here. And when you can just accept how you're here, you give yourself the permission to take a new step. But if you resist something, what does that mean? That means you have not allowed your eyes to go further. So for me, it's kind of like this. It's like literally it's literally every moment you're either walking through with the river or against it. And human psychology, because it oscillates between the known and the unknown, between the empty and the full. Mr.Within will say, pilot on, pilot your life as an attention that was free before the concept free existed. You are a being that became conscious. It's the human being. The glory of our species, the glory of our ancestors, all the stories we tell ourselves and store in our minds. These stories, what are they? They are the efforts of human beings. That means my far ancestors are as unknown as your far ancestors. You know what I mean? Like after some point, we can't see that far. And it's in some sense realizing the maturity of the mind to not treat the maturity of the mind to not treat itself only as an object or a subject, but as an experiential witness. So the Yoga Patanjali Sutras are going to make this point that they talk about consciousness being a glass orb, and this glass orb moving on a colored surface. So technically it's as if like the glass orb has no color, but whatever room you're in, whatever surface it's on, whatever moment you're in, you take a definition. So this kind of mindfulness, even Zen Master Dogen has this quote where he says, to study Buddha's path, you must study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things. The nature of all things. That means to awaken to the nature of your mind after you're no longer obsessed with endlessly seeing a self in the future. You just get to look at life for a moment. As Gandhi would say, there's more to life than increasing its speed. But the free will can, like I'm just saying, eventually, like probably in 100 years somebody's going to go and do this. Like so I'm saying, why don't we do it now? Why don't we start the greatest global community of explorers of the unconscious? We literally have to open our eyes to all the ways that many things can be possible. Efficiency before inefficiency. You have one before you have start. Alright guys, I guess it's, there's extra noise coming from outside. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great day. Much blessings and namaste. And one last thing I gotta say. Freedom is its own strength. Freedom is how the simple is okay before it becomes complex. That when you're okay with the simple, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how, when you become comfortable with the simple, that's when you appreciate the complex, I feel. So freedom is anything manageable requires to be made simpler. That means any situation, any problem in your life, look at it in a more simpler view, and you'll find avenues out of it, outside of that complexity. Leonardo da Vinci says simplicity is the most ultimate sophistication. You are free before you need to be. That's the nature of the mind. It is the sky that can never measure its illusion or truth. It is the cosmos after eons staring at itself. Blessings, guys.